Well, it's Friday, the 11th of September, and it's time for a Brexit update. But first, before I do that, I want to say massive thanks to just vast numbers of you. I asked, please send in information about what's happening in the channel if you've got it, if you live on the South Coast. I then put out the appeal, has a hotel near you recently been filled up with illegal immigrants? And I have been absolutely bombarded. info@nfarage.com is where I asked for the information, and I have had just the most massive amount of correspondence. Even I'm astonished by the sheer number of hotels all over this country that have been filled up over the course of the last few months. And I thank all of you for getting in touch with me. I've read every single one of the emails. I've responded to most of you. I've done my very best to. I can't even possibly begin to investigate and follow up all of the leads. There are just so many of them. I've also had many of you write to me with your own difficult personal circumstances, people who've been victims of crime, many other things. I just don't have the resources. I'm sorry to do individual casework. What I can do is to shine a light on big issues that are simply not being talked about by mainstream media. And really, the reason I started going to the channel was because people who lived on the South Coast started telling me what was happening, how the numbers were increasing. And I thought, well, why are mainstream media not covering it? Well, after some time of us doing it together, we did start to get mainstream media covering it. But where are we today? Well, I can tell you. Today is another dismal record day in the English Channel. Kent Coast Guard has confirmed 52 migrant boats have made it to British waters today. Many of them now, because there are so many boats coming, are coming all the way and landing on the shingle. And we're seeing a new trend of people who get to the beaches just disappearing. One particular incident today on Kingsdown, 33 life jackets found from quite a big dinghy, but only 7 people waiting to be picked up by Border Force. The rest gone, disappeared. 52 boats in one day, and yet I got considerable stick earlier this year for predicting there would be an invasion. We were told that the language Mr. Farage was using was completely over the top. Well, if 52 boats in one day is not an invasion, you tell me what it is. We keep getting words from Priti Patel. At last, we have an acknowledgement that there is a problem with the EU's Dublin regulations. So she's basically saying they're not going to do a damn thing until at least the 1st of January. How many more thousands of people will come? How much is this going to cost us? And by the way, what are the social consequences? Because the BBC and others will show you a pregnant woman, a young child. The newspapers will write that these are desperate people trying to get to our country. Well, 1 or 2 of them, maybe. But please keep this in your heads. 85% of those that come are young men between 18 and 30. Nearly all of them come from countries where women are not even regarded as second-class citizens, where tolerance of alternative lifestyles is 0, and we know that amongst their number, there are some that pose a genuine threat to our national security. And the knock-on effects of this are being felt up and down this country already. And yet when you write to your MP, most of them will do their best to ignore you or fob you off. I've got a case, for example, that's come in this week. A couple of you have written to me, and thank you. And I'm not going to name the school. I think that'd be wrong of me. But a girls' school in Birmingham, where the headmistress has now written to all of the parents saying that the girls must use different bus stops. The girls must take different routes to and from school every day because there is a hotel very close to the school that has been taken over by illegal migrants, and their language, their behaviour towards young girls is unacceptable, bordering on the dangerous. These are the knock-on social consequences of allowing a very large number of people illegally to stay in our country. And, you know, if you come from a completely different culture, then there are forms of behaviour that they may find acceptable that we find totally unacceptable. We've seen this happen in Malmo in Sweden and other cities around Europe. I don't want it happening in any cities in this country. I suspect that the migrant crisis is going to get considerably worse over the course of the next weeks and months. And it's time the government said, we are suspending the Dublin regulations. We cannot go on just allowing people, once they cross that line and get within 12 miles of the Kent shoreline, to be taken into the country and to be allowed to stay. But I would suggest you don't hold your breath. I also, on Law and Order, have had many of you write to me, deeply distressed by what's going on. I did put a video out of some scenes that happened in a small village in Kent called Greatstone, where somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people turned up for a rave. There was all sorts of damage done, all sorts of antisocial behaviour, 4 police officers injured, one of them very seriously. How many arrests do you reckon there were? 1. Just 1 arrest. And yet, Piers Corbyn, Jeremy's brother, I can't say I'm a supporter or fan of everything that Piers Corbyn stands for. But here's the point. Have a look at the videos of the arrest of Piers Corbyn. There's about 24 police officers. And this is what I'm getting time and again from people. A feeling that the law is being applied very harshly to those who are naturally quite law-abiding, but peacefully protesting, and yet violent protest and vandalism goes pretty much unpunished. We've had Extinction Rebellion this week in London, another Marxist organisation. Yes, of course, they say they're about saving the planet and all the rest of it, but actually it's a hard left-wing organisation. And again, yesterday, Churchill's statue was defaced by these people, and as far as I know, no one has yet been arrested and charged for that crime. So all sorts of issues like this. Of course, we are now facing lockdown, effectively. Only groups of 6 of us can meet from Monday. Yes, coronavirus infections are going up, but actually look at the numbers of people being hospitalised. Look at the numbers of people dying from or with COVID. We're actually losing, in the last couple of days, we will lose on average as many people in road deaths as we are due to COVID. And yet the government cracking down, taking away, I think, our reasonable rights and liberties. I'm certainly not happy that it's my mum's 80th birthday next week and we can't have a family party because we're not allowed under the law. But it's okay, because Boris has promised us the moonshot at a new testing regime. They're going to be 10 million tests a day early next year. Do you believe that? Well, we've heard about world-beating testing in the past. They failed with every single promise they've made, yet they think they make an even bigger promise and somehow we're going to go quietly. Which brings us to the most important political issue for Boris Johnson and his government. They got a majority of 80 because they very much took the Brexit party line on what Brexit should be. But there's a problem, and it's called the withdrawal agreement. And I know, of course, I'll be criticised, but I'm going to say this. I told you all this last year. The day after Boris signed that new withdrawal agreement in Brussels, I gave a speech in London at the QE2 Centre. All of my colleagues in the Brexit Party supported me 100% in what I said that night. I pointed out, firstly, that this wasn't just a deal, it was a new European treaty. Barnier was going around Brussels with the agreement, wrapped up in a leather folder, holding it up and saying, this is a new EU treaty. So, I didn't campaign for 25 years to leave the European treaties to sign up to a new one. But that is what Boris did. Yes, the backstop went, and the backstop was replaced by Northern Ireland literally being cast off, being put into a separate constitutional place. I pointed out that the European Court of Justice would continue to have jurisdiction. I pointed out that under fisheries, we'd signed up to the principle of non-discrimination, and that means that whilst we get our territorial waters back, we don't get our fish back. I pointed out that state aid would have to conform to EU rules. I even pointed out that in the treaty we made a commitment for our foreign policy to remain aligned to the European Union's. But nobody was in the mood to listen last year. We were suffering, I think, from Brexhaustion. We just had enough. And there was a new Prime Minister spreading optimism around the place, and people wanted to believe him. Now, I don't know whether Boris Johnson understood what he was saying, whether he'd really studied the document, or whether he just willfully misled the British people to get a short-term hit and to get something passed in Parliament. But the truth of where we are now, where Brandon Lewis admits we're going to break the treaty, we're going to break international law, which of course has led to very senior figures, people like Norman Lamont, Michael Howard, devoted Brexiteers, but they're very, very worried about us breaking an international treaty. Of course, treaties have always mattered to us. After all, we went to war in 1914 because of a treaty we'd signed to protect Belgian neutrality. We often quote the Treaty of Utrecht as why Gibraltar is still basically run by the British, or a dominion of the United Kingdom and not Spain. And yet here we have a government breaking a treaty. They say they won't back down. The European Union say that they will not change the treaty. All I know for certain is that Barnier will not change one dot or comma of that treaty. This is a mess of Boris Johnson's own making. If he backs down, we get Brexit in name only. If he carries on, we break an international treaty, and I think much of the world will look upon us poorly. It's a very, very tough place we're in. I'm not one that would normally advocate the breaking of treaties, but I can't bear the thought of Brexit in name only. Even if our international reputation has done some damage for a few years, better to get a proper Brexit and be free than be stuck inside their fisheries rules, their state aid rules, and to be overseen by the European Court of Justice. The truth of it is, a massive con job was put upon the British people last year with what was called an oven-ready deal. And the consequences of that are now coming back to haunt the Prime Minister. It's a difficult one, but I hope that this at least explains to you why we're in the mess that we are. Thank you.
We will make America great again.